The track itself is, on the surface, has a comforting chord sequence, just a comforting round of 4 chords that keeps coming back, played on nicely celestial piano, and yet there's interruptions throughout with the smashing glass. It's now a cliche, this smashing glass that was triggered by the Fairlight, you know, but not such a cliche in those days. The whole thing is interrupted by these shards of electronic noise, and that, of course, is expressing the underlying disquiet of the situation. So it's a lovely juxtaposition of the calm and the murmuring and this sharp interruption of the reality of this disgraceful situation.
She knows that I've been doing something wrong, but she won't say anything. She thinks that
I like this song, and it's quite a poignant one when you think about the fact that not that many years later her mother died, and she sang about that later on her album The Red Shoes. But here it's interesting because she's singing about well, probably her own mother and just the universal mother as well. But it's not sickly, it's not sentimental. She's also bringing in violence as well. So you get a real sort of visceral sense of life. And that life is quite complicated, and it's not all just sugary and sweet. And again, a real sense of passion there.
Well, one of her great achievements is to deal with very profound subjects, very challenging subjects. But normally the melody and optimism comes out. She is essentially a very happy person. She has a very happy family support network behind her. She doesn't have a bad life. In that sense, she has a very good life. And I think although she's willing to deal with very, very challenging and dark topics, ultimately her essentially optimistic and cheery persona will always come through.
The impact of love and a happy family life has influenced Bush's work since the beginning, as well as her strong interest in literature and film. The final track on side 1 of the album sees these two influences used together. Cloud Busting was the second single to be released from Hounds of Love. And although only reaching number 20 in the UK charts, it still remains one of her most iconic tracks.
Well, Cloud Busting is an interesting choice of narrative because it comes from a book source. It comes from a book called The Book of Dreams that Kate Bush read previously, about a child's relationship to his slightly mad, wayward father, Wilhelm Reich, who claimed to be able to harness the weather. And apparently at one point in the 50s was actually hired by a group of American farmers to create a rainstorm, and it worked. But later in the 50s I think he got into a great deal of trouble, and it didn't end well for him. But she saw this as an example of, again, the power of love from an older member of the family to a younger member of the family, and the younger member going along with the somewhat wayward parent. Out of respect and love.
It's a great example of the way she can really tell a story in a song and inhabit a character, and I think there's quite a frustrated actress in there, and it really comes out with this one.
you're making rain, and you're just in reach. When you sleep, escape me. You're like my
There was a pulse going through, which I believe we did on a tom that had a, I think it had some damping on it, so it was basically, it just trundled all the way through, like that. I think we put a tea towel over it or something like that. And again, it just built all the way to the end. Really, in a way, the strings were the thing that built the dynamics of that song.
We have a reprise, actually, of this 3-chord thing that was first introduced on Running Up That Hill. You've got this. In Running Up That Hill, it was in C. In Cloud Busting, we're in D flat. D flat minor is your 1 chord. B is your flat 7 chord. A is your flat 6 chord. That's it, and it's just variations on those 3 chords there, just like Running Up That Hill. It's that idea of, I'm going away, but I'm not going too far. I'm just doing that. So harmonically, that's what's forming the underpinning for Cloud Busting. But the difference is with this particularly, this track particularly, is the presence of the Medici sextet, sawing away real strings, I think mixed in with the Fairlight strings. So then it's a blend of the acoustic and the synthetic playing the same part. So you get this lovely rich string pump of sound.
Of all the tracks on the Hounds of Love, on the side 1 of the Hounds of Love, I think Cloud Busting's probably got more layers to it, more elements to it in terms of the whole musical concept of it, particularly in terms of the sort of classical elements there, folk elements in there, pop, rock elements in there, and then it builds to that choral ending.
Clearly demonstrating Bush's willingness to convey the meaning behind her music, Cloud Busting was accompanied by a hugely memorable video which starred the actor Donald Sutherland.
He was our first choice. I'm a big fan of him as an actor. We were very lucky. We had a friend who made the contact for us. We sent him the script and I talked to him and he was very interested, which was fantastic, and just happened to have the 4 days that we needed to shoot the video in. He was free for that time. And it all seemed to come together so well and so quickly. And he really was perfect for the part. There couldn't have been anyone better. He looked so right.
For Kate, the use of music videos also provided a suitable alternative to touring, and for the newly emerging MTV generation, there was no better way to be seen or heard.
The way the pop industry worked in the 70s and 80s and still works in many respects today is that you have to tour to promote your material. And she had toured briefly in 1979, the Tour of Life, and that had gone wrong. She didn't really like the whole touring process. The Kate Bush that we know and love, we really see on video.
What's interesting with the videos for the Hounds of Love album is how much they match up to the standard of the album itself, because I think some of her early videos were a little bit cheesy, you know, thinking of Babushka and things like that, a bit top of the popsy, mind you, a lot of videos were in those days, but she was really up there at the forefront. I mean, mid-80s, there was a move towards making videos more artistic, for want of a better word, with maybe more complex themes, a sense of storytelling, and Cloud Busting's a great example of a little movie in itself.
I'd say that there were early videos where at that time I was very influenced by dance and theatre, and the vehicle really was to use dance because it wasn't being used at that time. It was an unusual way of presenting things. But I think a lot of them really are trying to tell stories, and I prefer to think of them almost as short pieces of film that are either doing something visually interesting or are telling the story of the song where that's possible.
So by Hounds of Love, she's actually using the songs as a kind of a springboard to take her into different visual terrain. And at least 2 of the videos from Hounds of Love are very, very dance-based. And they have their own life. They're not just tied to the particular lyrical concerns of the song.
The visual elements created to promote Hounds of Love were striking examples of Bush's autonomy. Indeed, she even ventured successfully into directing on the video for the album's title track. The nature of Kate's work, however, was not always one that needed or benefited from a visual representation, as the imagery conjured up within her music and lyrics was enough to stimulate the listener to the desired effect, as the second side of the album was to prove.
Well, one of the first ideas I had was to try a concept. I've for some time wanted to play with a piece of music that was more involved than, say, 3 to 5 minutes. And I had the idea a good few years ago, but I'd never really put it into action, so it was really the concept side that came first. And I was a bit worried that it wouldn't work. So until I'd written, say, 4 or 5 songs, I wouldn't really know if it was going to be successful.
The first side of Hounds of Love had featured conventional songs and all the single releases. Yet the second side was to offer the listener something very different indeed. Entitled The Ninth Wave, Side 2 was a 26-minute conceptual piece, divided into segments, telling the story of a person drowning and their struggle between life and death.
I think it was an idea I probably got a few years ago, of someone being in the water for the night, and hadn't really tried it until this album. It's hard to say where it came from. I can only pinpoint certain war films as imagery that would suggest it. Things like The Corsi, those kind of old war films where people were being cast into the water, having really been through quite a heavy experience already. And the thing of actually launching from that, so that's the basis of the body in the water, but then the head travels off as the night goes on.
Wilson's dead, sir.
Sure?
Yes, sir. Stone cold.
Put him over then.
I think that the Ninth Wave sequence of tracks just takes it out of the realms of being a great selection of pop songs. There's nothing wrong with a great pop song, nothing wrong with a 3-minute pop single at all. But an artist such as Kate Bush, she has such ambition and such breadth of interest, such scope in what she can do. Sometimes you need to stretch out, and you can't stretch out in 4 minutes.
I think that's always been a side to Kate's character, the sort of prog rock side, if you like, where she's wanted to really explore a concept. And I think it works because the themes are continuous with side 1, the fate of being a woman and almost an interior monologue, whereas side 1's sort of very exterior and out in the world. This one is quite almost introspective.
The side opens with the dreamy piano-led and Dream of Sheep, changing the mood from the military sharpness that ended side 1 with cloud busting and setting the scene for the following 26 minutes.
And with the song and Dream of Sheep, she's trying not to fall asleep. I mean, as we know, that's what happens when you just before you drown, is you're falling asleep, and it conveys beautifully that sense of drifting and slowly expiring.
I'll tell you something interesting musically about And Dream of Sheep. It picks up exactly where Cloud Busting left off. Remember, Cloud Busting features those chords there. D flat minor. The first chord you hear in Dream of Sheep is this. Same key, same 3 chords.
Little light shining, little light guides them to me. My face is all lit up.
I think with this song cycle in the Ninth Wave, Kate really pushes her voice and uses her voice in very interesting ways. And with the song Under Ice, for instance, you've got the duality of this really soft, help me voice, and then the real deep, quite scary undertone almost of the icy voice, for want of a better expression, the one that is submerging her.